About our democracy and what's the future of it, where do you think we are at now, and what do you see as the future in terms of 2015? What do you see happening? We're not asking you to be Babalawo.
No. You know, I mean, there's the elections actually going on now in Maldives. I don't know if you know about that. It's been shown in here. But what is also interesting is I'm interested in the candidate in Nasheed, the guy who was Mohammed Nasheed, the guy who was removed. He said something. He granted an interview to Time magazine, and he made a very profound point. He said, "Look, you know, you can get rid of a dictator. You can get rid of a dictator. That is, if you classify him as whether it's a General Babangida or a General Abdul Salam or a General Abacha or whatever, you can get rid of them. What you can't get rid of is the internalization of dictatorship across the spectrum of society. And the problem we have in Nigeria, in my view, again, is because we are like I've said somewhere, we are like a plane flying without a black box. You know, we're a country, we don't have a sense of the past. We really couldn't be bothered. We're just living in a permanent present. Otherwise, proper diagnosis would have led us to understand that, first of all, we didn't have a transition like they had in South Africa. We didn't have a transition like they had in Afghanistan. Okay? Where you have a clinical break with the past. Okay, in 1999, Obasanjo became president. We were saying military rule had ended, but Obasanjo was a general. Now, nothing personal, except to say that we must concede that up till today, generals are still part of the political process. They're still competing in the political process. Space. It's almost like saying apartheid ended, and white people are still struggling to be presidents of South Africa. Now, I'm not denying the citizenship rights of any Nigerian, but it's just to show that the very fact that we're still literally in this movement, this motion, but no movement, tells you that the ingredients of democracy is establishing a democratic culture are almost not there, because the trappings of dictatorship, and they show in the Nigeria. I mean, you go to Ghana, you go to other countries around Africa, you don't see power manifested in the kind of way you find in Nigeria. The cost of running government, of maintaining just an individual. Now, all this paraphernalia, all this intimidation, all these blaring horns and clearing of the rest of us from traffic, these are the things we benefited from the military. And like somebody said about Zaire, he said the only person, after what the Belgians did in Zaire, the only person who could have governed Zaire would have to be somebody of a Mobutu. So there's a certain kind of foundation that once it is laid, you require certain kind of individuals to be able with particular reflexes. So the critical question for me is even to get the whole notion of democracy, democratization, constitutionalism into the minds of our political class. So far, we have people who are in politics almost in the same way and shape that if the soldiers were to come tomorrow, they'll just change their uniform or they'll just change their jerseys. There is no reflex or inclination to a greater appreciation of what democracy is all about. This is why we find ourselves being saddled with, they are showing us road, they are showing us water, they are showing us this is what we have done, this is the dividends of democracy. But there are scientific methodologies for measuring how is a country democratizing, how is a country, we are still having problems, serious problems with organizing elections. And elections in Nigeria will always naturally be violent. Okay, they'll be violent because people are not struggling to be able to govern. People are struggling to get to the handle of power. And ours is the only country where once you get the key, nobody can take it away from you. So I always say it's not because Nigerians are bad people. It is the size of the prize that people are competing for. You know, this is why our politics will always have the tendency towards violence. It's not because people want to be violent, but what you do after you've collected the key as governor is not only a game changer. It doesn't only change your life. Okay, it decides a range of things, almost literally matters of life and death, in a way, a manner that you cannot have in other parts of the world.
Okay, so if we were to say we're taking a clear analysis of the future of our democracy, what path would you recommend that we should be following?
You know, the first thing is, I think the first thing, and I'm happy you had Governor Fashola, again, I keep making reference to him, but you had him say that it's in Sokoto for the first time. And that's serious. Because if you go back and read Obama's book,
Audacity of Hope.
The Audacity of Hope. You cannot hope to be president of America without knowing the country like the back of your hand. Now, that means also that, first of all, we need to institutionalize and affirm the fact that this democracy with its flaws, that is the way we are going to go. Once we sign on, the next thing is, what should ordinary Nigerians know about themselves? Because again, as you heard the governor say, the things he never knew he could see in Sokoto, he has seen. Meaning that we are going to escape the enclaves that we've been living in, because 90% of the problems of Nigeria are born out of the prejudices that have been with us, which we can only resolve if we have railways and Nigerians can move with greater ease. Because that's the only thing. Every state in Nigeria has become almost like an incubator. And these are becoming incubators of hatred, because if you take a young man in Sokoto now who is maybe 30 or 40 years old, all right, he may never have been to Abuja, because how are you going to get to Abuja from here? But if you have a network, and this is why I said, when you have something like Governors Forum, I would like it to be that the governors are sitting down and saying, look, how can we connect these dots to move our people from point A to point B? And then you can have almost another year to think about how can we do this, where should the federal government fit in, and how is it possible for us to move our people from point A to point B. So it's like we should be thinking about how we can collectively make our people buy into democracy, because the frustration is what is leading to the violence. And unless you give people a reason to feel confident and to engage the process and believe that there is something in it for them, you're going to continue to have people doubting whether they didn't make a mistake by opting for democracy. But finally, just to say that I think we should be grateful to God that if it were 10 years, 20 years ago with Boko Haram, we would have had more than 1 or 2 military coups. But it is a sobering thought that for the last 2 or 3 years that we've had Boko Haram crisis, including the crisis of transition from Yar'Adua to Goodluck Jonathan, that had all the ingredients of a military coup, that this country has not had a military coup, and that no newspaper has written an editorial or nobody has written an article calling for the return of the military, is a measure of the fact that we are on the right path, and we need to only encourage our people to remain on this path.